Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, Spiritual Studies. And today we're going to be looking at the impersonal life with Joseph Benner. Over the last few episodes, we've gone through chapter 4 of the book of John, and now we're getting ready to do chapter 4, consciousness, intelligence, and will in the impersonal life. And we're going to get to that right after we come back from this song, which is a celebration of the material, because it's talking about a peanut butter and banana sandwich, which was Elvis's favorite kind of sandwich, and he liked it made a certain way, and you got to learn to mash it like the king.
Well, I was hanging in Graceland late one night. Elvis said, honey, could you fix me five? You want a peanut butter, banana too, and a glass of milk just like you used to do. Sliced it neat, laid it down with care, cut it in half like a love affair. Took it downstairs feeling proud and slick, but those bananas rolled out real quick. And mash it like the king, spread it real thick, no fancy cuts, just a creamy lick. Messy and sweet, that's the Elvis trick. Mash it like the king, and do it quick. Laughed so loud, didn't fuss or frown. Bananas on his shirt, slipping all around. He took my hand, said, let's fix this right. Back to the kitchen in the Graceland night. No slice, no dainty flair, just mash it up with peanut care. Spread it thick, don't be shy. That's how the king made his sandwich fly. Mash it like the king, spread it real thick, no fancy cuts, just a creamy lick. Messy and sweet, that's the Elvis trick. Mash it like the king, that's the pick. So next time you're hungry, don't be shy. Mash it thick and give it a try. Peanut butter, banana swing, and remember the king. Ding-a-ling!
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to hear some echoes from a very special person, someone who knew Elvis. They didn't know him really well, but they did know him. And that person is Diane McBain. And we can see her here with Elvis on screen. She was a very beautiful woman, and she co-starred, well, she was in Spin Out in 1966 with Elvis. And this is a picture from that production. So for those of you that are following my other series where we're walking through 1967, this lady knew Elvis the year before. She only knew him during that one movie, but they did spend some time together. And Elvis did give Diane a copy of The Impersonal Life, the very book that we're going to be reading today. And Diane said, I loved Elvis. He was wonderful. He was in good shape at that time. I remember him being tall, slender, and so beautiful. and he had this beautiful voice. I liked him a lot. He probably had affairs with some actresses or co-stars, but not with me. We had a really nice friendship on set. He was a spiritual guy, and he loved to read anything about being spiritual. He wasn't so much religious, but spiritual. And I, too, was fascinated by those things. So we bonded over that. We used to exchange books on set, and it was great fun. We would have conversations all the time about being spiritual. It was a good relationship, very solid. I just thought he was terrific. Diane says many things here, all of them lovely, but I want to go back through several of them. She says that she loved Elvis. Now, she only knew him for a very short time, and as she says later in the same quote, on set. So that tells you something about how powerful Elvis's presence and charisma was to others. She says he was wonderful. And she remembers that he was in good physical shape at the time. And he looks pretty good in this picture, so he must have been. She says he was tall and slender and so beautiful, and had the beautiful voice. And that she liked him a lot, which indicates that he was the kind of person people would like. And then she says he probably had affairs with some actresses or co-stars, but not with me. So that wasn't what their relationship was about. That Elvis wasn't going around and talking to women simply to have romantic relationships with women. He was talking to them as people, as friends, as fellow workers, co-workers. And she says we had a really nice friendship on set. She was very comfortable with Elvis around. She didn't feel like he had a romantic interest in her. She felt like they were friends. And she says he was a spiritual guy, and he loved to read anything about being spiritual. Now we know that at this moment in Elvis's life in 1966, because he was introduced to the Impersonal Life by Larry Geller in 1964, that he's been on this quest for around 2 years of reading these books. And she's noting that he's reading spiritual books. And she says he wasn't so much religious, but spiritual. And we talked in a previous episode about my feelings that Elvis didn't preach to those people that were around him. That he did want to spread the word of God, but that he did not preach at people. He did not argue against their own beliefs, against ideas that they may already have, or attempt to get them to believe ideas that they may not be ready for, because as the Impersonal Life has told us, you have to spend a long time in a journey for most people to get to a point where you can hear what the book is trying to tell you, or what the word is trying to tell you through other sources, that you don't have to get it through the book, but that you can't hear it from anywhere until you be still and know that I am God. So Elvis is in the middle of this spiritual quest, and she's seen it. And he's talking to her about the spirituality, and she's taken with it because she says, I too was fascinated with those things. But I feel, and I could be wrong, I could just be reading this into what she's saying, but I don't think she was interested in religion. I think that if she had been interested in Christianity specifically, that Elvis would have spoken to her of Christianity because she would have been more open to it. And that maybe one of the things Elvis is doing here is that as he has explored this path of spirituality, he has realized that this is a path he can bring people to bring them to Christianity, to get them ready for the idea of Christianity, which many people aren't ready for. They can't jump on the Christian path with you because they have not prepared themselves in any way, as the book is telling us. Not everybody's ready. And so they don't even hear him when he tries to talk to them about religion, or they become turned off by it. But everybody in Hollywood seems to be very taken with this idea of spirituality that's not necessarily connected to religion, and he's found that he can discuss his ideas with them without the religious overtones overshadowing or causing their ego or the materialistic side of their nature, that part of us that is not the divine, to shut out the message before it can be heard. Maybe that's what he's finding a way to do, because he's doing it with Diane. He's having spiritual discussions with her, although, in her words, they're not about religion. And if they had been about religion, I'm not sure that she would have wanted to hear them. I think it also shows you how in tune with other people Elvis was. That he was able to read things about them. And we see that over and over and over with different people around him. And as he once told Vernon, his father, who complained that people were trying to get things from him, that they wanted Elvis for their own wants and desires, and he told his father that you see what they want, I see what they need. And Gunn says that she can imagine telling her friends about Jesus in a caring way, not seeing anything wrong with that. And yes, he did tell his friends. So there are times in the Hilton Hotel and other places when he would read from the Bible to other people that weren't necessarily interested in hearing about Jesus. So he had done things like that, and he would continue to do things like that. But in this instance, and I think in Hollywood in general, for the people that are there, when you begin to talk about Jesus, they turn off. They don't hear you anymore. You can't get to the end of the conversation with them. But if you just take out the word Jesus and you call it spirituality, suddenly they'll go all the way to the end of the conversation with you, and they'll hear your ideas out, and they'll tell you why they're having problems with Christianity, which gives you an insight into them. It's just another form of communication. So I do agree that he did tell his friends about Jesus. And he didn't just tell them, he showed them, and not just through his actions, but with his symbols. So if we remember that he gave out the watch that had the multiple religious symbols, and he wore multiple religious symbols at his neck, but he didn't give up the cross. It's still there. So those that look at his neck and they see the Star of David, and they key in on the Star of David because perhaps they're Jewish, they're also seeing that the cross is there. So in that instance, in that moment, in that visual impact, he's again told them about Christ. And so I think he's trying to reach people. But Diane has other things to say. She's interviewed many times about Elvis. And although she only had these short interactions with him during this one period of his life, Diane says Elvis was very special. But I don't think he saw himself that way. I know he tried very hard. There was a sadness about him. It's probably why he eventually got into drugs. But I remember him very fondly. It just makes you wonder what could have been. Here's another very special quote. Because Diane knew Elvis, but she did not know Elvis. She knew Elvis during this very short period. She knew him as a professional on set, and she knew what he told her of his spirituality. And she says he was very special. And I'm sure he also thought that she was very special. But she did not believe Elvis saw himself as special. And that's a very interesting insight. How true is it? I don't know. It's her feelings about Elvis. And as we've noted, she had a short experience with him, but like everyone, she walked away feeling like they were lifelong friends. And she felt that he didn't value himself as special in the way that others did. And she says, I know he tried very hard. And so I don't know if she's referring to trying to see himself as special, or if he just tried very hard in life. Although I think both could be true, and she may mean it both ways. And she said there was a sadness about him. And we could argue about what this sadness might be that she sees in Elvis. Is it just something that she sees? Is it there? Is it his sadness and not being able to fully open to her about Christianity? Because we know he's very religious, but she did not see him as religious. Is it a sadness because he sees in her the kind of person, the woman he'd like to have as his wife, but he's not able to reach out to her in a romantic way because that's not what she wants. And he knows that. He can see that. And then she says, it's probably why he eventually got into drugs. To me, this is the saddest line of the quote, because Diane didn't know why Elvis took drugs. She didn't even know what kind of drugs he took or what he was taking them for or how they were involved in his life or if they were there at all. What Diane knew was what all of the public knew for all of these last 50 years. That there's all this stuff that's been pushed out about the drugs. Now, if you followed a lot of my series, you know we pushed back at a lot of that. And we've shown that Elvis was a very sick person, and he needed the drugs that he was taking in the 70s, that he may have been chasing highs in the 60s. And he may have got some highs in the 70s, but in the 70s, the drug use they're talking about is really for some massive pain that he had and some very serious conditions. And in the 60s, there was nothing illegal going on. He was doing things that every movie star was doing. And she did not apparently believe at this moment, when she was working with Elvis, that he was doing any drugs, because she says he eventually got into drugs. And so to me, this line, it's probably why he eventually got into drugs. It's the poison that has seeped into this wonderful woman's mind from the media. From the media portrayal and the betrayal by the three bodyguards, which led people like Steve Dunleavy and Rona Barrett, to get out there and publicize heavily Geraldo Rivera. These people went after this drug angle that had already been shown by the medical examiner not to be true. And here Diane is years and years and years later, and she believes Elvis got into these drugs. But she still remembers him very fondly. And then she says it just makes you wonder what could have been. And that makes me wonder, is she talking about what could have been with Elvis's life? Or what could have been if she had been open to a romantic relationship at the time she met Elvis? Or is it just wondering in all possibilities how many more children he might have had and who else he might have loved? And Gunn says that she didn't know he was sick, not just taking drugs for fun. Well, at this moment, he wasn't really sick. And the drugs he would have been taking were amphetamines to stay awake for the productions that she's in right here with him. But she's not noticing that he is under the effect of drugs. Now, does that mean that he's not under the effect of drugs, or that he hasn't been taking them, or he's not some kind of functional alcoholic is a term that you would use. Obviously, he's not doing alcohol, but functional. I don't think so. I mean, I think that there, now we would say there is no medical excuse or reason to be using amphetamines, especially without a prescription. Maybe there's some medical use, but not without a prescription. But back then, you got these pills a lot of times without prescriptions. They were beginning to come under control of the government or the pharmaceutical industry at this time, whoever is policing this. It's beginning to be known that unhampered use is a problem. And so they are starting to clamp down on this. But you could probably still get lots of concoctions over the counter. And the studios are openly giving this stuff to the, they're employing their own doctors to prescribe it directly to the actors and the actresses. So it's possible Diane herself is taking some kind of medication at this point in time and doesn't see anything wrong with it. She doesn't mention anything like that. I'm not saying she was. But I am saying that if she'd gone to the producer or the director and said, I'm having a massive amount of trouble staying awake because of the hours that we've got, how does everyone do it? Well, they'd send her to the company doctor, studio doctor, and he'd give her a prescription. And then Gunn's saying, but she meant the drugs later, didn't she? Right. She's talking about what she's heard after he died. And the things that the press has induced into her mind and into all of the public's mind. And then Diane also said in another interview, women have asked me many times what it was like to kiss Elvis, and I tell them it was just as wonderful as you would imagine. He was charming and a lovely person to work with. Elvis didn't come on to me, which I appreciated because so many did throughout my career. I think this is another important quote about the way that Elvis treated people. That Elvis did not come on to Diane, which means he did not make a pass at her. He did not ask her to be involved in a romantic relationship. He did not show a romantic interest openly to her. And as we know, there were many romantic relationships between Elvis and his co-stars, between women that he met. And we can see that Diane is an exceptionally beautiful and lovely woman, and she was able to speak about spirituality with Elvis, which not everyone could, and that was something he was looking for in a romantic partner. And yet, he did not come on to her, and she appreciated it because so many people had. And so I don't know if she had told him that these people had, or if that he knew that people had from, Elvis had sources of information. People told him things. Or if he intuited it, if he read it directly from her, but he respected it. And that was the respect with which he treated Diane, which is not the same as he treated other women. So this was very individual, tailored to Diane. And we do not have a copy of the impersonal life that he gave to her, but we know that he did because she talked about it to others during other interviews. I've not been able to locate those specific interviews, just references to them, and saying that he had given her this copy, or a copy. And I don't think that copy's ever shown up anywhere for sale, because I've not seen it in any of the auction markets. Can't be positive about that. There's a lot of auctions that happen long before the internet that I can't access in any way. But at this time, I don't know of this particular copy being out in the public anywhere. And Gunn says, but how was she supposed to know he was sick? The rest of the world didn't either. That's true. She was a victim of the information that was given to her. And she trusted the sources. But now let's take a look at the book we've been talking about, that we've been circling around with Diane. And that's The Impersonal Life by Joseph Benner, Chapter 4, Consciousness, Intelligence, Will. And the book says, yes, I know the many mixed thoughts that you have been crowding into your mind as you read. The doubts and eager questions, the vague fear that imperceptibility changed into a growing hope that this glimmering of my meaning, which has begun to penetrate the darkness of your human intellect, may shine brighter, so that you can see clearly the truth, which you instinctively feel is hidden beneath my words. Chapter 4 starts by telling us that you're getting a hint about what the book is trying to say, about what I am is trying to tell you from your heart. You don't really understand it yet, but you're starting to see glimmers of it, and you've become excited. And the book knows you're excited because you made it all the way into chapter 4. That to make it even this far means that this light is starting to shine into the darkness of your human intellect. And the book goes on, and it says, again, I say, this I am speaking herein is the real self of you. And in reading these words, it is necessary that you realize it is you, your own self, that is speaking them to your human consciousness in order to fully comprehend their meaning. The book's saying that you're having a conversation with yourself. That there's the divine you and the secular you. And the divine you is sending the secular you a message so that all of you can comprehend this message. The book says, and I also repeat, this is the same I am. That is the life and spirit animating all living things in the universe, from the tiniest atom to the greatest sun. That this I am is the intelligence in you and in your brother and sister, and that it is likewise the intelligence which causes everything to live and grow and become that which it is their destiny to be. This concept sounds very familiar to a very popular concept in a very popular movie franchise called Star Wars. And this is basically telling us what the Force is in Star Wars, when they use the Force and they say, may the Force be with you. It's the same thing. It's a life and a spirit animating all living things. Something that binds the entire universe together. And the book is telling us that this force, it's in your heart, binding you together with everything else, and that it's also God. And the book says, but you cannot yet understand how this I am can be. At one and the same time, the I am of you and the I am of your brother, and also the intelligence of the stone and the plant and the animal. The book tells us this is a difficult concept to grasp, that there's something in everything that is the same, and that we're all part of a much larger whole. The book says, you will see this, however, if you follow these my words and obey the instructions herein given. For I will soon bring to your consciousness a light that will illumine the deepest recesses of your mind and drive away all the clouds of human misconceptions, ideas, opinions that now darken your intellect, if you read on and strive earnestly to comprehend my meaning. So listen carefully. The book is restating the concepts of the first 3 chapters. That you have to be still and know I am. You have to clear your mind. You have to understand that there is a secular and a divine portion of you, and that the secular will one day burn away, and only the eternal will be left, the divine, and that piece of you is already one and the same as and a whole with the rest of the universe. And God asks is there life in stones? According to this book, there is. And I wouldn't think of it as life like we think of it scientifically. It's life in the sense that it is an intense order. Okay, there is a fight in the universe between chaos and order. And there is a movement for all order to become chaos, and we call that entropy. But if chaos were to completely rule, there would be no life, because life is order. And that's not exactly what this book is saying, but it's part of what it's getting across here, is that the stones, like ice, is a crystalline structure. But ice is fragile due to temperature. Stone is fragile like ice, but in our experience, we don't normally reach the temperatures that would cause the rock to melt. And so that rock stays in this crystalline format. And all of the molecules and the atoms are frozen into a certain structure that is order. Complete chaos has absolutely no order, and so you wouldn't get even a stone. And so a stone is a representation of God's will, because it is order from chaos. Something had to form the stone at some point. And that was the Creator. And like everything he has created, it is imbued with a piece of himself. In this case, it's order. Now, that's just one way to think about it. And it's not necessarily exactly what this book is saying. But let's move on with this book. So listen carefully. I am you, the real self of you, all that you really are. That which you think you are not. That is only an illusion, a shadow of the real you, which is I, your immortal, divine self. On this plane of existence, here on the reality that we know as Earth, we are individual beings. And we have been gifted that individuality for survival purposes. That it leads us into experiences and lessons that we need for the divine, but it also allows us to survive this mortal plane. But that once we leave this entire existence that we have now is the illusion. Because our immortal divine self is part of this much larger whole, and always has been. We've been given an illusion of self for the purposes of this existence, but only for this portion of this existence. And the book says, I am that point of consciousness focalized in your human mind, which calls itself I. I am that I. But that which you call your consciousness is in reality my consciousness, thinned down to suit the capacity of your human mind. But it is still my consciousness. And when you can drive from your mind all its human misconceptions, ideas, and opinions, and can cleanse and empty it utterly, so that my consciousness can have a chance to express freely, then you will recognize me, and you will know that you are nothing, being only a focal point of my consciousness, an avenue or medium through which I can express outwardly in my meaning. The book is saying you are part of a much larger plan. You're not just part of a larger universe. You have a purpose, and that purpose is my meaning. And that you are expressing that purpose by being you. And you've now reached the point where being you, you need to listen to the divine you, the me, the I am, to understand that you are part of this plan, and to now consciously take your place in it. The book says, but you cannot see this yet, and of course cannot believe it until I fully prepare your mind by convincing your intellect of its truth. The book is telling us that you're only in the 4th chapter of this book. You can't possibly believe everything I've told you yet. You're not ready for it. But we're going to move forward into the book, and then we're going to make you ready. But even now, I know that this intellect, this ego of yours is saying, this isn't true. I have my doubts. And it's saying, bring your doubts with you. And the book says, you have been told that each cell of your body has a consciousness and an intelligence of its own. That were it not for this consciousness, it could not do the work it so intelligently does. But each cell is surrounded by millions of other cells, each intelligently doing its own work, and each evidently controlled by the united consciousness of all these cells, forming a group intelligence which directs and controls this work. This group intelligence apparently being the intelligence of the organ, which the cell compromising its form. Likewise, there are other group intelligences in other organs, each containing other millions of cells, and all these organs making up your physical body. So the book uses the example of your body as an intense system of organization. Again, we bring order from chaos. Life is this order of the cells. At least in this mortal existence, our life is this order of cells that is so perfectly ordered and aligned, it forms these organs, each of which knows what to do to work as a whole to keep your physical body working. Chaos would never allow this. This is order. And the book is saying that each subsection of that order, as small as you can carve it down, has its own intelligence, being the portion of the Creator that has been imbued into it by being his creation. Now you know, says the book, now you know you are the intelligence that directs the work of the organs of your body, whether this directing is done consciously or unconsciously. and that each cell of each organ is really a focal point of this directing intelligence, and that when this intelligence is withdrawn, the cells fall apart. Your physical body dies and exists no more as a living organism. Here the book begins to substitute the word intelligence, or not substitute, it's using the word intelligence, but we could substitute the word soul or spirit. There is an energy inside you that directs all of these pieces of you to work together for your better whole. And that we know this to be true because when that energy, that soul, that spirit, that intelligence is withdrawn, in other words, when you die, the physical body stops working. And all of the order breaks down and returns to chaos. The book says, but who is this you who directs and controls the activities of your organs and consequently of each cell composing them? So now the book asks us, this intelligence, what is it? Now I've already given some other words we could substitute, but the book is saying, let's check this out together. The book says, you cannot say it is your human or personal self who does this, for you personally can of yourself control consciously the actions of scarcely a single organ of your body. And so we might look at this passage and say, well, there's some fakers in India, and I might be pronouncing that word slightly incorrectly, but they're holy men in India who apparently are able to take a great amount of control of their physical being, their organs and such. They can even control to the point that they don't feel pain and such like that, or to slow their heartbeat to nearly nothing. But most of us, we don't have that kind of control. We don't really have that control over anything inside of us. Maybe your hands and your feet. You know, what your mouth and your tongue are doing. But inside any of your organs, probably you don't really have any control. The book says it must then be this impersonal I am of you who is you, and yet it is not you. So this book, I think, is saying that it's the rhythms of the universe that is directing the life in your body, the I am, which is in touch with all of the universe. This is the part that's truly keeping you alive here on this mortal plane. And that somewhat makes sense because even when you're no longer alive on this mortal plane, this impersonal I am will still be there. I guess you could think of it like the pilot of a plane or a person driving the car. That the body is the car and the impersonal I am is the true driver. And the book says, listen, you, the I am of you, are to me what the cell consciousness of your body is to your I am consciousness. So the book has given us all of this as a metaphor for what we are ourselves in the universe, or to God. we're part of this plan for God in the same way that every cell of our body is part of the plan for us. And Gunn says, is he talking about everything connected to each other in the universe? Although you've used the word universum, maybe that's a specific idea in Sweden? I'm not sure, but yes, he is talking about everything being connected to everything in the universe. And it's much like the Force in the Star Wars movies. I think that's the most apt pop culture reference. And back in the 60s, when people read this book, there would have been no Star Wars, no pop culture reference to this idea. You'd get close to it in some 60s sci-fi, like specifically some books. And I'm thinking like Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, I think is the name of the book. They got really popular around that time. But as far as regular people knowing these ideas, they had never encountered ideas like these. I think now when you read this and you've ever seen Star Wars, you would connect this to the Force, and it would make it easier for you to intake this idea. But in the 60s, you're coming into this completely blind. And the book says, listen, you, the I am of you, are to me what the cell consciousness of your body is to your I am consciousness. You are a cell, as it were, of my body, and your consciousness, as one of my cells, is to me what the consciousness of one of the cells of your body is to you. The book continues to draw out this metaphor of the body. And the book says, therefore, it must be that the consciousness of the cell of your body is my consciousness, even as your consciousness is my consciousness. And therefore, we must be one in consciousness, the cell, you and I. Here the book is describing how the oneness with the universe can be defined or distilled into this trinity: God, you, and the cells of your body. The book says you cannot now consciously direct or control a single cell of your body. But when you can, at will, enter into the consciousness of the I am of you and know its identity with me, then you can control not only every cell of your body, but that of any other body you might wish to control. I think at this point we've moved beyond most religious ideas, most religious thinking. However, this is an explanation for how Jesus, or perhaps Jesus is the wrong example, one of his disciples would have healed people through faith. That they had so much faith, they had control of their body in the cells of any other body, that they felt they had the blessing of Jesus to control. So it feels kind of like he slipped in an explanation for how miracles occur, specifically healing miracles. But this idea is, again, very, very similar to the Force. in Star Wars. That if you had enough control over it, you could control these cells. It's also similar to the ideas of the Indian holy men we just talked about. That with enough practice, meditation, and control, you could control every part of your body. But that is as far as we're going to make it in this book for today. So in the next episode, we're going to come back and we're going to finish out chapter 4 in the impersonal life as we continue through this metaphor of the cells in your body, and we learn more about the fight between order and chaos. And until then, I'm going to leave you with this song, Word on Fire, about Elvis's personal journey through these texts that we're reading. And until I see you all again, thank you so much for being here. And you all keep on taking care of business.
can hear